On this episode of Geek Dad Life, we're going to review the new He-Man, the Masters of the Universe Power Sword by Mattel.
By the power of Grayskull, I have...
Hello everybody and welcome to Geek Dad Life. It's your host, Jay Gladfelter here. So I have thoroughly enjoyed opening and reviewing all of the new Masters of the Universe merchandise from Origins, Masterverse, and all the toys supporting the new CGI He-Man and the Masters of the Universe show on Netflix. My family and I really dig it. And so this is the first kind of role-play power sword that we've gotten for any of the lines so far. So if you like this video and want me to do more like it, hit that like button. And if you want to see when those episodes drop, click the subscribe button and that bell icon. So yeah, this, I think it was showing up in Walmart's in the fall of this past year. And you can still actually pretty easily find it on walmart.com right now for $19.95. I believe some of the more collector-focused toy store websites are out $25, $26 a piece for these swords, but you can find it for under 20 bucks. And you know, I think out of all of the role-play toys that you could get for any He-Man line, I think the Power Sword would be number one on that list for most kids. Now, I know my kids really dug the new CGI He-Man Netflix show, and I think they will really get a kick out of this Power Sword. But, you know, while this is definitely for the kids, this thing is a straight, you know, homage to the Power Sword that we got in the New Adventures of He-Man toy line. And you may not realize it just looking at this one, but when you actually have it side by side with the vintage Power Sword from the New Adventures of He-Man toy line, it is absolutely trying to evoke the feel of that original. It has a plastic, a yellow kind of translucent plastic blade, and then we have kind of the gold hilt. And really the only thing that would be separated is maybe putting a blue button here for the actual Power Sword components. But, you know, this came out, what was it, 1989, 1990, something like that. And this one now in 2021. So has the technology evolved? Let's see. So this is the original sound effects. Ooh. That blaster effect's still really strong. So this definitely has some of the older school sounds that we would find on, you know, really any electronic toy back then. Unfortunately, this thing keeps going. I wish I could get it to stop. But anyway, still, I think it's so cool how the new He-Man and the Masters of the Universe Power Sword absolutely is getting that nostalgic feel for the New Adventures of He-Man, which again, not the most popular iteration of He-Man by any stretch of the imagination, but still, it's a really cool, or a vintage role-play toy from the He-Man universe. I will say at least the New Adventures one came with a sheath that you could put your sword into and kind of attach it to your belt, which is pretty cool. This new one does not do that. It's just the sword, but still, I think it's pretty cool. I know some people are commenting that this thing is a little too small, but again, this is for kids. And if we're comparing it to one that was for kids when we were kids, yes, the new one is a little bit longer, but this one is definitely wider. But yeah, I think, you know, for what it is, I think it's perfectly fine. Again, for 20 bucks, sorry, this one is more than enough, I think, for most kids. And it's a pretty solid piece of plastic. I mean, eventually, I'm sure my kids would break it, but really, that's any play sword. Eventually, they're gonna break it. But the packaging is pretty simple. It's similar to what we saw with what we have seen with the Ghostbusters roleplay toys, where it's just kind of like a hang tag for the sword, and really uses not that much packaging at all, which I'm actually pretty okay with. The less packaging we have to kind of fight through, the better. But let's check its actual measurements here. We are looking from the very top to the bottom, about 20 inches total for the total length here on this Power Sword. So again, in my, you know, grown-up hands, it definitely seems too small. It's more like, you know, the Sting from The Lord of the Rings or The Hobbit. But in a kid's hands, I think it actually still looks pretty cool, and I think they don't care. I think they think it looks like a really cool power sword. So yes, this thing looks more like the power sword you would see in the new adventures of He-Man than what you would see in the new Netflix show. It has the gold hilt, but the sword itself is definitely, steel. And it also kind of separates and gets bigger and all that kind of stuff when it's activated. So while it doesn't necessarily win on accuracy points, I think it wins on nostalgia as well as the actual light and sound features that are a part of it. Mainly because, in the new show, the kind of action sequences when they are turning into their powerful alter egos, as well as their weapons kind of activating, is the cutscenes they have for those are really cool, as well as the special kind of battle effects that they might use. So I think the actual audio and visual add-ons to this really send it over the top for me. So let's listen to some of these different effects. So you just press the button to hear and see those.
By the power of Grayskull,
And then we just, so that's, your Eye of the Power turning into He-Man. And then you have some just nice kind of battle effects. I think is that Masters Attack? I don't know. So they have we have the power when they all kind of activate their powers of Grayskull. So I think that's pretty cool. If you're talking about some of the really cool scenes in the new show, some of the things that my kids really dug were those cool cut scenes. And so it's something that kind of sets this new He-Man apart, while I think also still kind of evoking what the original cartoon series did, because Filmation was kind of notorious for these kind of repeated cutscenes. But I really dug how they did that in the new CGI He-Man show, and I love that this power sword kind of recreates that for the kids that are role-playing it at home. If I would have one recommendation, it would have been nice kind of how the new adventures of He-Man's sword had different buttons to kind of engage different effects. So you kind of had it when you could do the laser shot, as well as some of the fighting effects. It would have been nice to have a couple different buttons here to kind of let you kind of pick and choose which sound effects you were activating, because again, you kind of have to just go with whatever is coming up next.
by the power of Grayskull.
So if you're fighting, you don't want that one to come up. You want it just to kind of just be the battle effects. And then you probably want something on the side to be like the I have the power, I've turned into He-Man. So again, maybe that's nitpicking, but it's something that, especially if they're evoking the feel of the new adventures sword, it's something they solved back in the late 80s, early 90s, that they could have easily kind of done here with this new power sword. So that's my one nitpick. The size doesn't bother me at all. Again, it was 20 inches from bottom to the very top. But yeah, I think, kids are going to really get a kick out of this. And if you're getting it at that kind of normal retail price of under $20, I think this thing is an absolute buy, not just for the He-Man collectors like us, but for those of us that have kids, or nieces and nephews that really dig the new CGI He-Man show. I think they'll really get a kick out of this as well. I think my boys will definitely be adding this to their armory of different lightsabers and pirate swords and all of the above. So I think it absolutely gets the Geek Dad Life buy rating, and I highly recommend picking one up if you see one. Definitely check out some of the other videos on my channel, like this one that YouTube wants you to check out, and one of my more recent videos. And until next time, hasta luego and goodbye.